That means you want to say something. We've done it for enough years. My eyes are right there. So you can just make sure it's that's good, yeah. Right, so slightly more. Yeah. Is that all right? Yeah. Well, no, it's great. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Assalatu wassalamu ala rasulillahi amma ba'd. Welcome to our Red Events meeting today, our session today with UK Fostering. We have here with us Urs and Tim, and I'll allow them to do their introductions, inshallah. And we just So I will allow Tim and Urs to give their own introductions, but if I tell you a little bit about my relationship with UK Fostering, I started working with UK Fostering probably about 5 years ago, I would say, and my role there is an independent panel member. So once the process for the setting up and getting people through the what we call the Form F, which is quite a long process to check people and monitor them and see how they are. Once they come to the end of that process, it goes through to a panel, and the panel check all of that process and all of the paperwork that comes with it. And that format is usually sort of 100 pages long, lots and lots of information. We all go through it, and then we have a meeting at the end of all of that, and then we make a decision as to whether people go through. And my role there is an independent panel member. So because I used to work as an imam in prison service, I brought the Muslim side of things, but I also brought the criminal justice side of things as well to that. So that was my kind of role. I've been thinking a little bit about UK Fostering and the needs of Muslim children for a period of time. We do in UK Fostering have quite a few Muslim foster parents, but there's still a huge need. So we need to look to see if we can improve that and get more people in. So I'll pass you over to Urs and Tim. They'll introduce themselves, and then they'll tell you a little bit about the process and what's going on with fostering in the UK today, and the particular needs that we have in the local community and the wider community as well. After that, we'll have some teas and coffees, and there's some food, inshallah, and we can mix and talk a bit more, inshallah. I'll pass you over.
Thank you very much, Shafiq, and thank you very much for inviting us here to do this presentation to you. It's lovely to be here, lovely to meet you all. My name is Urs. I am one of the founders of UK Fostering. I'm a social worker by trade, and for UK Fostering, I'm also the person that's registered with Ofsted, so I have a formal function towards the government and our regulator with Ofsted. Been a social worker for probably about 30 years. and I've worked in child protection and fostering for most of that time. And with me is my colleague Tim.
Yeah, so yeah, I'm Tim. I'm the head of placement and recruitment. So my role in the main is to recruit foster carers, find people that may be suitable, take them through the fostering process, and also my team places the children with the families. And we match very, very carefully the children that need families with the right household setup that's out there.
Okay, so what we want to do from our end is tell you a bit about fostering and what it is. Some of you might know a bit already of what foster carers do, and we want to explain to you a bit more as well as we talk. What is UK fostering? How do we operate? What are we about? Shafiq said it already earlier on. There is a great need for foster care, for more foster carers in the UK, anywhere, but also for foster carers from particular cultural or religious backgrounds to look after children that are from a similar background. With Muslim families, this is a lot of the time for children who come to the UK from abroad as unaccompanied asylum seekers come to the UK, and we will talk a bit more about those kids and how they arrive here and how we can help them to settle and find a safe place in a good family in the UK. So, and I'm aware we've got a couple of children here as well with us, so we need to be a bit mindful as well because with some of the questions, I wanted to ask you actually, one of the questions, do you know sort of why children come into foster care, or maybe why they can't live with their own parents? Got any idea why that might be, that kids can't live at home themselves? Yeah. Yeah. So children who come from abroad, maybe in a country where there's a war and their parents may have been killed, or their parents sent them abroad to be safe, to be in a safe place. Yeah, absolutely. That is one big reason. Yeah.
And drugs as well.
And
drugs as well.
Drugs in terms of parents drug using, drug abusing. Broken family, yeah, absolutely. Dysfunctional families where people just fight and argue, where there's aggression and violence. Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Just to repeat it.
Yeah,
I'm just making sure that for online that I repeat. So yeah, domestic violence is one. It's a risk to children. I think the majority of children that come into care actually come into care because of neglect. Now that's meeting the needs of the children, and that could be for a number of different reasons. You know, it could well be mental health problems that the parents are struggling with. It could well be drug addiction, domestic violence. We live in a time, and I think we've all seen it, we're all old enough to see in the last 10 years how we struggle as a society. There's not as much support from the government as there were. Society is becoming more dysfunctional, and the children are suffering a lot more, say, now than they were 10 years ago. So in terms of what we're doing here, it's a growing need for foster care because a lot of children are struggling in home. Yeah. 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 Yeah, absolutely right. There's a big need for carers to support children with disabilities, and it is twofold. Number one, there are families that struggle with their children with disabilities, and they need a break, and that's really important for some families to maintain their situation. The foster carers can help out every weekend, for example, or every other weekend. There are some families that just can't meet the needs of a disabled child. Caring for a disabled child for some people is too much, and sometimes you do need specialist carers, people that are trained to be able to care and are supported by the system to care for the child with disabilities. The interesting thing about disability is for a lot of people, you say disability and people go, well, I couldn't care for a child with disability. And often that is a natural ignorance. If you've not come across disability, it can be something to worry about. When you do come across, and I work with children with disabilities, when you do come across children with disabilities, you actually see the child first. And it's a child with a need. And actually, a lot of people do have the ability to care for a disabled child. But it's only within the sector that level of skill, or at least an ability to learn what is the child's needs, how do I support the child with extra needs. In many ways, anybody could care for a child with disabilities if they've got the right approach and willingness to learn.
Really excellent contributions from you in terms of the reasons why children come into care. We covered a really broad range. One thing that all of these children have in common, they don't live with their parents anymore. And vast majority of these children would have lived with their parents for a number of, for a certain time. Most children have had traumatic experiences from any range of what we discussed now. Now, foster carers work and look after children that are not their own, that haven't been with them from birth. And that for any and all of those reasons that we talked about. And that sometimes poses other challenges and difficulties, because with your own children, you've known them since birth. These children, not. Yeah. So you try and compensate for that in a way. You have to be flexible. You have to be accommodating. You have to be curious. You have to be very tolerant, incredibly patient to start working with some of these kids. But these are a few attributes that foster carers have to have. On a practical level, as foster carers, you do anything and everything that you do for your own children as well. You get them up in the morning, prepare breakfast, you make sure they get to school safely, depending on how old they are. You walk them there, you drive them there, or they take a bus, or they walk themselves, depending how old they are and depending how mature they are. You clean for them, you cook for them, you take them on a holiday, you get them involved in playing football, music lessons, whatever their interests and hobbies might be. You look after their cultural needs, you look after their religious needs, you make sure they have positive, good role models. The biggest positive, good role model has to be yourselves for them as well, because they'll be looking up to you. So you, in a lot of ways, do for them what you do for your own children. But at the same time, and this is where it gets more complex, they also have their own parents still. Yeah. And this is a difference here as well. I wanted to talk briefly about adoption, because children who are adopted often have no more contact or very restricted contact with their parents, or they don't have their parents anymore at all. With fostering, often the birth parents are involved with the child in one way or another. And that makes it sometimes more demanding, because you have to accommodate sometimes the parents' wishes and involvement to a certain degree still. One thing difference to a child's life. It's the starting point, it's the end point. If you love kids, you have a good chance to be successful in that. If you don't have a love and a passion for children, you're going to fall probably at the next few hurdles, because the amount of patience, perseverance, commitments that's required. If you're not in it for that sort of reason, you're not gonna be able to outlast that. And Shafiq has mentioned before sort of his role as an independent panel member, and our independent panel members, they look out for those sort of qualities in foster care. Are they in it? Are they in it for the right reasons? Have they got that background? Have they showed that they can persevere when things get tough? Not all foster carers have children of their own. It's not a requirement at all. We have a lot of very successful foster carers who don't have their own birth children. It's not, it's not a necessity. It can help, but I've seen people who, for whatever reason, don't have their own children, can't have their own children, who have done an absolutely incredible job as foster carers. Any questions to this point? Anything that I said that you want to hear a bit more about at this point? Question is, once you embark, is it a long-term commitment?
I
Go for it. Yeah.
I have poor so I go upstairs with you. So in terms of why children come to care, some of the time the children come to care in emergency. So it may well be police have gone into the home, they've seen the conditions, it's really bad, the children are removed immediately. And that we call an emergency placement. Now, an emergency placement could be for a couple of days, it could be weeks. Many times an emergency placement that starts as a crisis turned into, actually, this child's doing well here, the child can't go home, can they stay long term? So it's not strange for children to stay for many years up until adulthood. But children will come into care all sorts of durations, emergency, sometimes short term, sometimes kind of a state before respite when a family just needs a bit of a break where everybody can have a breather. And sometimes a child's removed because the courts think that there's a risk at home. An assessment is done over a period of several months, and then the court says, okay, we're now happy, this child can go back, the family have got the support that they need. So there's various different lengths of time. And in terms of foster carers are needed who can react to emergencies, and carers are needed that can do long term. A lot of foster carers kind of say, okay, I will see what comes in and I'll react. So if you need me on that day and I can do that school run, and those particular children kind of match with my skills and experience, then that child can be placed that same day. And then also they may say, but I'll consider long term if it's needed. So it really depends, and that's where the matching side comes in. We look to match with your skills, what you're looking for. Doesn't mean we won't debate with you. Sometimes you may say, oh, I'd really rather, look after a child from 10 to 15, and we might have a 9-year-old third, and we say, oh, have a look at this because we think you might be brilliant for this particular child. But that's the matching side of things. So sometimes people come into fostering and think, oh, will it mean I just have to take any child? And it doesn't. It means that we work carefully with you to match the right kind of child. Doesn't mean that there's not challenges, and sometimes we don't know. So when a child's taken from a home, the police have gone in, or let's say the parents haven't picked up the child from school because they've been drinking, for example, we don't always know exactly, what the needs of that child are. So it's a little bit of, okay, let's find out, we'll place short term, let's see. But in the main, what's important to know is that you're not forced on to take on a child that doesn't really match your, skills and experience. Albeit, there are some foster carers that would say, anybody, wherever there's a need, if a child needs me, I'm here. Sometimes that comes with a bit of experience as well. So, foster carers will think differently about what it is they're able to do and who they're able to support.
And just to add to that, some foster carers, because we talked a bit earlier on about the some cultural or religious considerations when placing a child with the families. We have some families that say, for example, if they're from a Muslim background, they say, do you know what, I just feel most comfortable with that because they would fit in best into my family. We have families from a Christian background who say, do you know what, I would feel more comfortable if the child was from a Christian background as well. That's absolutely fine. And then you've got families that say, look, it really doesn't matter. We give it a go with, with which from whatever background. It's really, really important that if you were a foster care, that you feel comfortable with that, because you are doing this work in your own house, around your own children, family, and that. So there is, even after someone starts fostering, they always decide who is, say, for example, not coming to their house and who is coming to their house. Not we, not the local authority. Nobody can say who would be placed into foster care's house. It's always their decision at the end of a matching process. With children who come to the UK as unaccompanied asylum seekers, we had a brief discussion earlier on, and they're often sort of from the age 13, 14 and upwards. So we would get a good maybe 3, 4, 5 years with them to help them settle in the country, to help them to learn. A lot of them are very keen to learn English, to settle, to make friends, to go to college, to really impressively focused on these things. So then it's maybe a longer term commitment as well, because we don't want children having to move from one family to another family to another family. Yeah. And we got some kids, they're now 20 odd years old, they still live within the family because the family said, well, you know what, we got the space, you can stay. Our involvement from UK Fosterings as an organization must end when the child is 18, because they're an adult, they can decide now themselves. We can't go in and say anything about that placement, but we would always support whatever we feel is in the interest of the child. Yeah. So I want to talk to you a bit about, sorry, please.
Earlier in the presentation, you talked about trauma.
Yep.
As one of the reasons why people children go to foster homes. Is it always the case that children that go into foster homes have one challenge or the other? Behavioral disability has been mentioned. Are there situations where you have typical children, typically developing, typically growing children that haven't got issues that go into foster?
Yeah. Can I answer that?
Okay.
Yeah. I would say in terms of displayed behaviour, it all very much depends. I think the reality is every single child that comes into care has suffered something. How they show it can be very different. So, for example, there are some children that display it very openly. They may have anger issues and display. There are some children that become very much in themselves, but they hide away, they hide in their bedroom, they won't want to come out, they won't want to engage. They will feel the world is a very scary place and adults let them down, and you as a foster carer will let me down as well. I don't want to be part of this, this home or this engagement. So I think every child is going to act in a certain kind of way. I think probably it's fair to say any child that suffers from trauma, as we would do as adults as well, will have some impact on their personality. Because the trauma that you see and the development, when you come from a background where you suffered a level of abuse, there's probably a dysfunction. You've probably not understood what's the standard kind of behaviour. It's not strange for some young children to come into foster care at the age of 6, 7, 8, and they can't use a knife and fork. And that's a good example of things that we kind of take for granted. That's a simple thing we all learn to do. But actually, children sometimes are so far neglected that they don't get the opportunity. And another case, actually, is if we think about our normal lives, and we think about where we live in the UK, we can all go to the seaside, for example, and we probably all go to the seaside, once or twice a year. I play for children in their teenage years from certain areas who have never been to the seaside. And in terms of, it's a great example of the opportunities that some children don't have. And you think about some of your own children, swimming club, football club, different things, you know, that you take your children to that builds their self-esteem and confidence. A lot of these children have not had that. The parents can't afford that, or they choose not to do that. So there's a massive difference between often what your children would have experienced and what some of these children have. And that always has an impact. To some degree. So I think it's fair you would have to be ready to deal with some level of challenge that you wouldn't otherwise maybe experience with your birth children, but you are trained as well. So we offer a lot of training. The idea behind it is as foster carers, you're trained therapeutically, and you can look at the behaviour and go, I understand that's typical behaviour, but I understand where it comes from. This is the way in which I can approach it. Or you'll go to your social worker and or other trainers and say, help me with this, because this is what I'm seeing. How do I get around it? So as a team, we're a big team that works around the child. You'll come up with strategies together to deal with you know, what you're facing.
Yeah, I have a little question to that as well. So what's or how does the parents manage impact of bringing foster children into the home in terms of mixing with the children in the home? How do you manage that impact? Okay, we have a child that has got certain challenging behaviors as a result of whatever he has suffered or she has suffered where he is coming from. And then there is a child that the parents aspire to raise in a particular way. How do we manage the impact of that?
Yeah. No, that's a good question. So the question, just for the where it's been recorded, is about the impact on your own children whenever another child comes in who may have some sort of challenges. Now, I think the reality is, and something that we're clear about, is fostering does impact the whole family, and it does impact the birth children. And sometimes they will be seeing behaviours that maybe they wouldn't have seen otherwise. In many ways, sometimes the children get on well, sometimes they don't. But in many ways, siblings do sometimes get on well, sometimes they don't as well. What's been interesting over the years, and I've been in the sector for 20 years, is the number of children who have grown up through these difficult times that get to 18, 19, 20 and say, I'm going to be a foster carer. I want to be a foster carer like my mum. And I give you a great example. In the next couple of weeks, I'm due to go and see a 21-year-old who 3 months ago moved out from her parents' home, a foster home. She lived through probably the most horrific case I've ever come across in years, in terms of how traumatized these particular children were from what they suffered. And she comes out 5 years later and says, the first thing I want to do is foster. And there's a staggering number of people that come away. So albeit sometimes it can be hard, it can be hard for your children as well. There's a lot of inspiration that actually children go through, a lot of learning. If you can explain to your child as well as they get older, look, together as a family, we are supporting children who have not had it so easy. But you're absolutely right. It is a challenge finding that balance, because there may be certain things that you would do with your birth child where you'd say, no, don't do that. That's not acceptable. And the reason you know it's not acceptable is because you brought that child up from birth. The child knows what's right and wrong. You bring a foster child into the home, you don't know what they've been taught. They're having to learn new things. It can take a long time to learn new things. So you have to be patient. So in some ways, sometimes you're having to deal with the children in two different ways. For your birth child, you might be a little bit more strict because, you'll think there's no trauma reason why that behaviour is happening. But for a child who's coming into foster care with you, you think there could be so many reasons why that behaviour. So I have to let some of it go and work it more therapeutically. So it is a challenge, but often good communication with your birth child to explain at any level. You can explain to your child, look, we're helping these children who have suffered. Children often do very much get it.
Yeah. And very important consideration, though, that question and how it impacts, how it plays out is very different from family to family. You know your children better than anyone else. You know how much they will understand. You know where they might struggle. And sometimes children of our foster carers, they they struggle at first. All of a sudden, somebody else comes to the house, and now they have to share the time from their dad, from their mom with someone else. But I think overall has a positive impact on the birth children as well, because they can become role models for other children, and they can see that, oh, this gives me some kind of relevance as well. They sometimes take other children under their wing to help them, to progress them. Where foster children are a lot older than the birth children, I've seen very many great examples that foster children actually help and protect your birth children then in a lot of ways. So I think kids there are very, very adaptable, but generally speaking. But the best judge of that, how that pans out, that's always going to be you as the parent of your own children. Just want to talk a bit as well about what are sort of some of the requirements to become a foster carer. So I said one big one of them, you have to love kids, otherwise it's a non-starter. Second one is as well, you have to have time. If in a household there's say 2 people and both of them work full time, it's difficult. If you have 9 to 5 jobs, both of you. If one of the people in the house has, say if both people in the house work, but one of them has flexibility at work, that should be okay. In some households, one person is at home full time whilst the other person works. That should never be an issue or a problem. Another really important one is you have to have space. You need a spare bedroom, because the foster child has to have their own bedroom. They can't go into a bedroom with your own kids as well. So that's really important. There are other considerations. You have to be reasonably healthy. If someone has acute health issues, health problems, it may not be the right time. If somebody's just coming out of, for example, a cancer treatment and it's recovering, that's not a good time to start fostering. They have to look after themselves first before they can look after someone else. Did I miss any big criteria there?
Now, probably at the beginning stage, the first question we ask for is do you have a spare bedroom? Because some people can have the best of intention, but you don't have the space, and of course that impacts. Some people don't, whether they have the space, or they go, well, I will have the space a year, or I'm thinking about doing an extension. There are different options, but that's the first one. A lot of the other aspects we can explore, because when you talk about working, some people can work in different ways. They can work from home. It can sometimes work if we're dealing with older children who may be a bit more independent. That can work if you've got 2 people working. I think from our perspective as an organisation, we're happy to talk to anyone and say, okay, tell us about what your circumstances are. Let's see what we can do. So we wouldn't sit here now and want you to think, oh, God, no, actually, I don't fulfil that criteria. We'd say, well, let's have a chat. Let's see. Lindsay is our recruitment officer. Very, very experienced, and she's happy to talk to anyone. Even if someone thinks, I'm not ready now, but I might in 2 years, we can have a chat now. So that's something that we're willing to do with anybody to find out. So I suppose the message I'd say is, don't rule yourself out. Let us rule you in, and we'll tell you if there's things that can work or things that don't work. Something I think is important to know is really how many children are there in foster care in the UK. So overall in care, there's 80,000 children, of which 60,000 children are in foster care. So that's 20,000 children as well outside of foster care in, say, children's residential homes. They're living in the group home conditions. But in the main, the idea is that every child has the opportunity to live in a family environment. So part of what we do as well, another type of referral is we have a 15-year-old ready to move into a family. They had a really difficult time when they were a bit younger. They've had a couple of years of therapy in the residential. Is there a family out there that can give them that opportunity, those last few years in a functional family environment before they move on into independence? That's another one of our big needs. There's a number of things that we thought about and we wanted to talk to you about today. I think something that we haven't necessarily said, but it's about the level of support that you have around you. So we talked about adoption being when you take on a child that legally becomes yours, kind of off you go. But with fostering, what you're doing is effectively you're caring for a child as part of a bigger team. So there's a social worker for the child, it's a social worker for you. We've got reviewing officers that make sure everybody does their job properly. We link in with the school, with the teachers. Sometimes we have therapists as well that work. So you're doing it as part of the team. So at no point is it there's your child off you go deal with the challenges. It's together, how do we ensure that you're supported to do what you do? So what that means is, and I see you're thinking, what that means is we will be coming to visit you at least monthly. We'll be talking to you, ringing you at least weekly. And, you know, your social worker, who will probably support about 12 or so foster carers, is always on the phone, always able to ring someone. At night time, if there's a crisis, there's a social worker at UK Fostering, you can always ring. So that support is always there around you. But I pass you.
Yeah, yep. I mean, really, really, really important what Tim said. You'd never be left to your own devices to try and figure out what you do, how do I help and support the child. There's always somebody available there if you need them. We are an organisation that's registered with Ofsted. I said it a bit earlier on. A bit like the schools, same body. Ofsted registered children's homes, registers fostering agencies like UK Fostering is one of them. We are rated outstanding in all categories by Ofsted, and that is still quite rarely achieved. So we have a very, very strong focus on quality. We want to be the best that we can. Our social workers, our administrators, our foster carers, everybody works really, really hard to achieve that, to do the best that we can at any stage, at every stage. But for that as well, the support must be there for you as well, obviously. I mentioned it briefly about training. We run a lot of training courses, some of them in person, a lot of them we do online as well now, and we also record our training courses, so foster carers can access those courses whenever it suits them, daytime, evening time, weekend. We do a lot of social events as well for kids during the summer, during the winter. We do events for foster carers. We run support groups, foster carers, where we gather and we can have informal chats and discussions. So we're sort of what we try and have and do is a family feel about what we do as well. People are very generally and genuinely very interested in each other within UK Fostering. They want to find out, who are you, what are you doing, how's it going, can I help you with anything? So there's a lot of that going on in our community amongst our carers as well. We also have other elements of support for our foster carers. We have access to, our foster carers have access to a legal helpline, to a financial helpline, to a health helpline if you get any worries about your kids, yourselves, whether that's to do with health or legality or financial bits. Counselling helpline as well, something that foster carers access if they have worry or concern about children. Yeah.
Can I add one about?
Yeah.
Now, although we're an independent organisation, we have a charity that links very much to us. I'm a trustee of the charity. So I think very quickly what we do. In March, for example, I'm taking 2 of our foster children out to India. We have what we look to do out in India. We look to take over government schools in the rural areas of India. So those are the lowest caste, those living in poverty. And we looked at, so I take every year 2 of our foster children out for an experience in India. In our Midlands team, we have a lot of Pakistani foster carers, and I'm sure you'll all be aware about the floods in Pakistan, albeit it was really not seen on the news in the UK very much. And we did fundraising events. We raised in the end £5,000 for emergency supplies in Pakistan. We're going to be doing a similar event this year. We might do that in different regions, but last year we did that in Birmingham. So we look to provide support via that charity, and some of our foster carers get involved in that charity as well. So that's a little side thing that's very important to us as an organisation. It's a charity side of things that we do. Now that may be a question session. Yeah. Can I throw out there other questions that anybody has from anything that we've said? You can either ask it openly here, or when we have something to eat, we can have a one-to-one chat as well. So anything you want to ask.
Yep. Question is, how long does it take to vet a foster care from application? Between 3 to 6 months. Yep. So we need to do police check, a health check, a local authority check, references from work, references from personal. A social worker would come and have sessions with you to ask you questions about your family, your work life, your interests and everything. It's an intrusive process. We want to know a lot. What I always say to people, if any of you had to give me your child today, what would you want to know about me that you could be just halfway reassured? And the answer often is, I want to know everything about me in this case. So that's a bit the way to look at it. So
Have you got a spare bedroom?
Sorry?
Have you got a spare bedroom?
I do.
He would be very good.
Yeah, so it takes that length of time. We do some training during that time as well. And we try at every stage to explain as well why we're asking a question, why we're asking questions. People sometimes can feel, why are you asking me such intrusive things? Now you're starting to sound like something's wrong with me. And then the answer would be, well, no, nothing's wrong. We just need to find out that we can reassure ourselves that this is a good, this is a safe home. It's a good home for children to go to. Yeah. So that's, it's a really important question. So there's no quick start to fostering. Really, it takes a good few months. Yeah. And at the end of it all, you get to be in front of a panel of which Shafiq is a member. They're all from different backgrounds and different professional angles as well. We have a solicitor on there, we have a nurse on there, we have somebody from education on there, from residential settings, from a social work setting, from different parts of planet Earth as well. People sit on there. So to have that diversity on there as well, that represents the applications from people that come. That represents from where the children come as well. Yeah. Does that answer the question? Yeah. Cool.
So
Yeah.
Let's go for the good testimony.
Yep.
The first 6 months, the couple, the first spouse.
Yep.
This is the next question.
Okay, good question. So the question was, the assessment is done, they passed panel, they're kind of ready now, right? So I'm handing over, because this is really your field, Tim.
That would be the point at which you're then allocated your social worker. So your social worker would come out to see you, to get to know you, to get to know the family, to understand what it is that you're able to give, what fits with the family, where your skills are. My team then will start looking at referrals. We get about nationally 100 referrals a day comes in for different children. So we would start to look at what would be suiting your family. We would send referrals to your social worker, who would then come to you to say, oh, we've got a referral here for a 12-year-old boy, let's say. These are the needs. This is where the school is. Could you do the school run? Whatever the matching criteria is, and we start working like that. Now, it could well be that child is placed in that day. So at the point at which you've gone through the panel process, 1 week later, you're fully ready to go as soon as you say, yes, I could take that child. And if they were chosen, matched with that child.
Okay, is it testing process?
So that's in terms of matching. You mean, how do you know whether it's going to work? Yeah, I think with the idea with matching, if we match well, we've got a really good idea whether it's going to work. I think when people first go through the process, obviously they don't quite know, they've not been there before. So often we'll say, okay, well, we're going to place children on a short-term emergency basis only. We're not going to make a big commitment long-term because we don't know. So you may say, okay, well, I'm fine for a week. Now, it may well be down the line, you go, this is working well. The child says, I really like it here. The social worker says, actually, this child can't go home. Could you keep the child longer? And at that point, we can make a joint decision altogether. Yes, that child can stay longer. Some people come into fostering, they're very confident about themselves and they say, I can offer long term. I know I can. Let's find the right child, we'll match, and I guarantee that things will be okay. Other people, quite understandably, say, oh, just a bit unsure. When I first start off, I need a bit more training.
The other point as well, maybe where the question was going, I'm not entirely sure, is that can we try to see how it goes with the child and then decide whether they can stay? The short answer to that is usually no. That we need to do the work beforehand to do the best we can from the information about the foster family and their skills, their setting, and the child and the need. Because what we don't want is for the child to have another negative experience to say, sorry, but you can't stay in this family because the family doesn't want you, or it doesn't work in this family, and therefore you have to move on. Sometimes it happens. It doesn't always work. Yeah, it really does not always work. But we from UK Fostering will help you, the foster carers, to do everything that we can to make it work. And that's where that patience, that perseverance, and that commitment has to come in. A lot of the time, foster carers get like a bit of a honeymoon period with children first, because a lot of kids are scared when they come to a new family. If they come to me, they don't know me. They think, who's this guy living in this house? Don't know this place. Why should I feel safe here? So they behave. And then they get to know me, and then they start to see, oh, well, he's nice enough. And then they feel a bit more relaxed. And then maybe they start to misbehave or just try out different things. Maybe go on my nerve, maybe say things that I don't like to hear. So that usually comes out after a few weeks, sometimes after a few months only. That's when I would have to persevere, give reassurance, show the child, hey, you're not going anywhere. You're staying here. I can deal with that. You're here to stay, and we're gonna make it work one way or another. But you need support. Foster carers need support, help, sometimes a bit of respite. Some of our kids go to another carer for a weekend or for a week, for a holiday somewhere else as well, if the going gets too tough for the family.
A related question to that is, from all that you have explained, is the exit process.
Yeah.
If one decides, okay, having tasted it, I don't know, something else spontaneous.
Yep.
What's the exit process?
Yep. Good question. So how do we end it then if it does not work?
Oh.
We would, like in the build up to that, work with you to see if we can make it work. And again, can make it work. We try this, we try that, we try that. If then at the end of that process, you as the family would say, look, I can't. This is not okay anymore. I can't. You can give notice on the placement. Yeah. Just like you can give notice at a workplace, you can give notice. By standard, we ask for 28 days. Sometimes that's got to be shorter because it's just really not safe. But usually about a month to plan, okay, where else can this child now go? So that is always in any time foster carers can give notice. Sometimes we don't want to accept it because we think, no, you can do it. Work with us for a bit more. We know you can do it. And then we say, and other times we've realized as well, they say, no, this is not working. Not in this family, but we may have another family, maybe where it can work. So we do that as well. Just looking at the time as well, Shafiq. Yeah, because we're around and we can continue that as well. Thank you.
So lovely. Thank you so much, guys, Urs and Tim, for giving us all of that detailed information. Really valuable, and thank you for elucidating on certain aspects of foster care. It's really, really important. So thank you very much for coming today as well. Thank you all for attending. We will continue the conversations in the side room with a little bit of food, inshallah. So we'll end the live stream now and continue the conversation inside. Thank you all for coming as well.
Thank you very much.